Havana. The autumn of 1961. The humidity in the Cuban capital is not just a weather condition, it is a physical weight, pressing down on the crumbling colonial architecture and the new, stark realities of the revolution. In a requisitioned villa in the Vedado district, the air conditioning unit rattles violently, fighting a losing battle against the Caribbean heat. Inside, the air is thick with the blue-grey haze of tobacco smoke. Major Nikolai Leonov of the KGB sits across from a young, exhausted Cuban intelligence officer from the DGI. The table between them is littered with black and white surveillance photographs, transcribed radio intercepts, and a series of alarming yet utterly baffling physical evidence reports. To the Soviet mind, trained in the brutal, efficient, and logical methodologies of the Kremlin, the scene laid out on the table does not resemble a covert war. It looks like a hallucination. The KGB had arrived in Cuba expecting a conventional shadow war. They anticipated sniper teams, sabotage of electrical grids, or perhaps the funding of counter-revolutionary paramilitary groups in the Escambray Mountains. They prepared for the ruthlessness of the American Central Intelligence Agency, the same agency that had clinically dismantled the government of Iran in 1953 and Guatemala in 1954. They respected the CIA as a predator cold, calculating, and precise. But the intelligence flowing into this safe house in 1961 suggests that the predator has gone insane. The Cuban officer pushes a dossier across the mahogany table. It details an intercept regarding a high-priority American asset attempting to make contact with a waitress at the Havana Libre Hotel. This is standard tradecraft. But the payload, the weapon specified in the intercept, is not a silenced pistol or a plastic explosive. It is a capsule, a specifically engineered botulinum toxin pill intended to be dissolved in a chocolate milkshake. Leonov reads the report twice. He looks at the Cuban officer, waiting for the punchline. There is none. The report claims the capsule was supplied by the Technical Services Division of the CIA, but the operation failed, not because of a brilliant counterintelligence sting, but because the capsule froze to the side of the freezer in the hotel kitchen and shattered when the assassin tried to retrieve it. The Soviet major stands up and walks to the window, looking out over the Malecon, where the waves crash against the seawall. He is deeply unsettled. In Moscow, assassination is a grim bureaucratic procedure, a car accident, a heart attack induced by gas. It is serious business. This milkshake plot sounds like fiction, a desperate lie concocted by a double agent trying to sell fake information for quick cash. But it is not an isolated incident. Another file on the desk describes a plot involving a box of cigars. Not just any cigars, but Fidel Castro's preferred brand. The intelligence suggests the Americans are trying to treat the tobacco with a botulinum toxin so potent that merely putting the cigar in one's mouth would result in immediate death. The chemistry required is advanced, the delivery method is childishly complex. Then, there are the whispers of even stranger things. Reports of American agents asking about the fabric composition of diving suits. Intercepts discussing the migration patterns of Caribbean mollusks. Why is the world's greatest superpower, possessing thousands of nuclear warheads and the most advanced MiG-21 aircraft killing technology in existence, suddenly obsessed with seashells and scuba gear? To the KGB, this does not look like incompetence. It looks like a smokescreen. The Soviet doctrine relies on maskirovka military deception. Leonov and his superiors in Moscow begin to suspect that these absurd, cartoonish plots are a dazzling distraction. They believe the CIA is flooding the zone with noise, generating hundreds of ridiculous threats to force Cuban security to chase ghosts, while the real strike is being prepared in silence. They are looking for the dagger, but the Americans seem to be throwing confetti. The fear in the room is palpable. If the Americans are willing to try to poison a milkshake, what are they hiding? What is the actual plan? The Soviets cannot fathom that the chaos might be the plan itself. They begin to scramble, doubling the guard details, analyzing every shipment of food, every box of cigars, every piece of clothing that enters the presidential palace. The paranoia is total. Every shadow could be an assassin. Every seemingly innocent object could be a tool of death. If you want to uncover the hidden mechanics of history and the secret wars that shaped our world, make sure to subscribe to Cold War Impact right now. The confusion deepens as the weeks turn into months in late 1961. The sheer volume of threats creates a boy who cried wolf dynamic, yet the wolf is very real, and it has unlimited funding. The KGB station chief in Havana sends urgent cables to Moscow center. He reports that the Americans have seemingly abandoned political rationality. They are no longer trying to simply remove a leader, they are trying to orchestrate a spectacle. One particularly disturbing piece of intelligence arrives via a mole within the Miami exile community. It speaks of a plan not to kill, but to humiliate. The report details a scheme to dust the broadcasting studio where Castro gives his speeches with a chemical compound similar to LSD or a thallium salt that would cause his famous beard to fall out. The objective is to destroy his machismo and image before the Cuban people. The Soviet analysts in Moscow are baffled. They are accustomed to fighting over ideology, territory, and economics. They understand the language of intercontinental ballistic missiles and T-55 tanks. They do not understand the weaponization of hair loss. They debate endlessly. Is this psychological warfare? Is it a test of Soviet chemical defenses? Or have the Americans simply lost their minds under the pressure of the Kennedy administration's demand for results? The KGB begins to suspect that there is a rogue element at play. The precision of previous CIA coups is entirely absent here. This feels reckless, emotional, and dangerously personal. The Soviets know that President Kennedy was humiliated by the Bay of Pigs disaster earlier in 1961. They know his brother, Robert Kennedy, is driving the intelligence community with a whip. But the leap from political pressure to exploding cigars is a gap the Soviet mind cannot bridge. They launch a massive counterintelligence operation, codenamed to intercept these bizarre delivery systems. Cuban agents penetrate the Miami underworld, looking for the suppliers of these exotic gadgets. They find connections to the mafia figures like Santo Traficante and Sam Giancana. This terrifies the KGB even more. The blending of the American government with organized crime syndicates suggests a total breakdown of the rule of law. If the CIA is hiring mobsters to poison Cuban leaders, the rules of engagement for the Cold War have just been shredded. As 1961 bleeds into 1962, the atmosphere in Havana is electric with tension, the enemy is everywhere, and the enemy is ridiculous, which makes them terrifyingly unpredictable. The KGB advises Castro to stop eating in public, to stop smoking specific brands, to never sleep in the same place twice. They are fighting a ghost that takes the shape of a clown, and they are terrified that while they are laughing at the absurdity, the real blow will land. But the strangest report is yet to come. A courier arrives from the coast with a transcript that references something called Operation Mongoose. It is not a singular assassination plot. It appears to be a massive, government-wide mandate. The scope is terrifying. It isn't just about killing one man, it is about utilizing every asset of the United States government, from the Department of Defense to the Peace Corps, to unleash a torrent of chaos upon the island. And at the center of it, hidden within the files, is a mention of a spectacular. The KGB analysts stare at the word, a spectacular. What could be more spectacular than a nuclear war? They are about to find out that the American imagination for destruction has ventured into the realm of science fiction. Washington, D.C., early 1962. While the KGB station in Havana is drowning in reports of poisoned milkshakes, a very different kind of meeting is taking place inside the Pentagon. The Soviet intelligence apparatus, for all its moles and listening stations, is struggling to perceive the full shape of the beast they are fighting. They see the tentacles, the botched assassination attempts, but they cannot yet see the head. If they could look into the office of Brigadier General Edward Lansdale, the chief of operations for Operation Mongoose, the confusion would turn into cold dread. Lansdale is not a typical military man. He is an advertising executive in a uniform, a man who believes wars are won not just by killing the enemy, but by rewriting their reality. He has been given a blank check by the Kennedy White House and a single overriding command: get rid of Castro. The method does not matter. The budget is effectively infinite. Back in Havana, the KGB starts to intercept chatter that suggests a shift in tactics. The sniper rifles and poisons are still there, but now there is talk of the spectacular. The Soviet decryptors stare at the phrase. In Russian, it translates awkwardly. It implies a show, a performance. The intelligence reports describe a plan so elaborate it sounds like the plot of a fever dream. The Americans are researching the atmospheric conditions off the coast of Havana. They are sourcing a submarine capable of surfacing silently just beyond the horizon. The payload is not a nuclear missile, but Starshell's fireworks designed to illuminate the night sky with blinding intensity. But the light is just the canvas. The KGB uncovers the second half of the plan, a voice. The Americans are discussing the technology to project a voice from the sky, amplified to deafening levels, speaking directly to the Cuban people. And the script? It is not anti-communist propaganda. It is biblical. The plan, known as the Second Coming, involves faking the return of Jesus Christ. The submarine would light up the sky. The voice would condemn Castro as an antichrist, and the superstitious rural population would rise up in a religious fervor to overthrow the regime. When this report hits the desk of the KGB residency, silence falls over the room. The Soviet Union is an atheistic state. To them, religion is the opium of the masses, a tool of control, but weaponizing the Second Coming? It is beyond their frame of reference. They analyze the report for hidden meanings. Is Jesus a code name for a paratrooper division? Is star shells a euphemism for tactical nuclear weapons? They cannot accept the literal truth because the literal truth is too insane. Yet, the threats remain physically tangible. The Second Coming might be a psychological operation, but the physical attempts on Castro's life accelerate with a terrifying creativity. The KGB realizes that the CIA has moved from trying to access Castro's food to accessing his hobbies. Fidel is known to be an avid skin diver. He spends hours in the waters off the coast exploring the reefs. It is his only sanctuary, the only place he is alone, or so he thinks. Soviet intelligence begins to track a specific request from the CIA's Technical Services Division involving Caribbean mollusks. They are looking for a seashell. Not just any shell, but a specific species, large enough to be spectacular, colorful enough to attract the eye of a curious diver. The plan is to pack the shell with high explosives and rig it with a pressure trigger. They intend to paint it in iridescent colors, making it irresistible. The idea is that the leader of the Cuban Revolution, the thorn in America's side, will swim down, see a beautiful object, reach out to touch it, and be instantly vaporized. The KGB is forced to deploy divers to sweep the reefs before Castro swims. Imagine the scene. Elite Soviet frogmen, trained for underwater sabotage against NATO warships, spending their days gently turning over rocks and inspecting seashells for wires. It is a humiliation. It is a waste of resources. And it is exactly what Operation Mongoose is designed to do, induce paralysis through paranoia. But the most insidious plot, and the one that comes closest to succeeding, relies not on explosives, but on trust. In late 1962, James Donovan, a renowned American lawyer negotiating the release of the Bay of Pigs prisoners, is preparing to meet Castro. Donovan is a man of honor, a diplomat. The CIA knows Castro trusts him. The agency decides to use Donovan as an unwitting mule. The plan is simple and horrifyingly biological. The CIA acquires a high-end diving suit as a gift for Castro. Inside the laboratory, technicians treat the lining of the suit with a fungus that causes Madura foot, a debilitating skin disease. But that is just the beginning. They impregnate the breathing apparatus with tubercle bacilli, the bacteria that causes tuberculosis. The plan is to give Castro a slow, wasting death that will look like natural causes. The suit is prepared. It is lethal. It is ready to be handed to Donovan, who has no idea he is about to become an assassin. The KGB knows something is moving. They detect the procurement of the suit. They detect the biological research, but they are missing the delivery mechanism. They are watching the airports and the docks, expecting a smuggler. They do not suspect the friendly lawyer coming to discuss peace. The tension in the Kremlin reaches a breaking point. Nikita Khrushchev is reading these reports of exploding cigars, poison pens, faked religious miracles, and toxic wetsuits. He sees a superpower acting with the erratic violence of a cornered animal. To the Soviet leadership, this is not a game. It is proof that the Kennedy administration is unstable. If the Americans are willing to violate every norm of diplomacy and warfare to kill one man in Havana, what will they do to the Soviet Union? The absurdity of the CIA's plots does not make the Soviets laugh. It makes them desperate. They conclude that Cuba cannot be defended by conventional means. If the CIA is going to use magic tricks and biology, the Soviets need a deterrent that is impossible to ignore. The bizarre nature of Operation Mongoose convinces Moscow that an invasion is inevitable and that the Americans are crazy enough to try anything. This logic leads to a fateful decision. If the Americans are going to play dirty, the Soviets will play big. They decide to ship nuclear missiles to Cuba. The mystery, of the exploding cigars and the poison pills is not just a collection of funny anecdotes. It is the catalyst for the greatest crisis in human history. The noise, the chaos, and the sheer weirdness of the American plots act as a smokescreen that obscures the real danger, but it also pushes the enemy into a corner where their only option is the nuclear option. As the summer of 1962 approaches, the KGB stops looking for seashells. They start clearing the ports for massive Soviet freighters. The CIA is still playing with toxins and magic tricks, unaware that their harassment has provoked a response that will threaten the entire world. The stage is set. The Americans are trying to start a circus. The Soviets are preparing to end the world. Paris, November 22nd, 1963. The City of Light is grey and drizzling. In a quiet, upscale neighborhood, a meeting is taking place that feels like the climax of a cheap spy novel, yet it is deadly serious. The CIA has moved beyond exploding seashells and contaminated diving suits. They have realized that gadgets do not kill dictators, men do. Inside a safe house, a senior CIA officer, Desmond Fitzgerald, is meeting with a man codenamed AM divided by Lash. This man is Rolando Kubela, a major in the Cuban army and a former hero of the revolution. To the CIA, Kubela is the golden ticket. He is an insider, a man with direct access to Fidel Castro, a man who has grown disillusioned with the communist turn of the regime. He is the dagger they have been waiting for. But the KGB and the Cuban DGI, the Directorate of Intelligence, are not blind. They have been watching the cracks in their own ranks. They know that treason is a disease that spreads in the heat of political frustration. While the Americans view Kubela as their secret weapon, the intelligence apparatus in Havana views him with deep suspicion. The twist in this narrative is not just about the weapon, it is about the blindness of American intelligence. They are so desperate for a win that they are ignoring the red flags. In the Paris safe house, Fitzgerald presents the weapon. It is not a rifle. It is not a bomb. It is a ballpoint pen. It is a standard-looking black paper mate pen. But inside, the ink cartridge has been replaced with a hypodermic needle, so fine it is almost invisible. The mechanism is spring-loaded. The plan is for Kubela to approach Castro during a meeting, perhaps while looking over a map or signing a document, and click the pen. The needle will extend, prick Castro's skin, and inject a lethal dose of Blackleaf 40, a potent poison. The death will be instant, silent, and look exactly like a massive stroke. The CIA officer assures Kubela that he will have time to escape. This is a lie, or at best, wishful thinking. Anyone killing Fidel Castro in a room full of bodyguards is on a suicide mission. Kubela looks at the pen. He is unimpressed. He asked for a high-powered rifle with a telescopic sight. They gave him a piece of stationery. But then, the universe plays its own twisted joke. As the CIA officer is handing the poison pen to the would-be assassin, literally passing the instrument of death across the table, a phone rings in the distance. Or perhaps a teletype machine begins to chatter frantically in the embassy nearby. The exact mechanics of the news delivery vary in the telling, but the timing is an immutable historical fact. At the exact moment the CIA is setting the mechanism to kill a head of state in the Caribbean, the President of the United States, John F. Kennedy, is struck by a bullet in Dallas, Texas. The operation creates a terrifying mirror image. In Paris, the Americans are the conspirators, handing over a hidden weapon to remove a leader they despise. In Dallas, the Americans are the victims, watching their own leader fall to a sniper's bullet. The irony is so sharp it cuts like a knife. The very administration that authorized Operation Mongoose, that pushed for the spectacular, that demanded Castro's head, is decapitated in plain sight. For the KGB watchers and the Soviet leadership, the confusion turns into instant high-alert panic. When the news of Kennedy's death hits Moscow, the first thought is not grief, it is fear. The Kremlin assumes this is a coup. They suspect that the right wing of the American military-industrial complex has killed Kennedy to seize power and launch a nuclear first strike against the Soviet Union and Cuba. The Soviet military goes to full combat readiness. In Havana, Castro hears the news. He is listening to the radio. He stops, looks at the officers around him and says, "Everything is going to change." He knows the Americans will look for a scapegoat. He knows they will look at him. The twist of the mystery becomes clear. The CIA's obsession with killing Castro had created a world so filled with smoke and mirrors, so saturated with plots and counterplots, that when a real tragedy struck, no one could see the truth. The Americans immediately suspect Castro is behind the Kennedy assassination. They wonder if the poison pen plot had leaked, and if Castro had decided to strike first. Did the golden ticket, Rolando Cubela, play a double game? Was he a dangle, sent by Havana to waste the CIA's time, or was he a genuine traitor who simply lost his nerve when the world fell apart? The Paris meeting breaks up in confusion. The poison pen is never used. Cubela eventually returns to Cuba, where the secret plot is not so secret. The Cuban intelligence services have eyes everywhere. The DGI has penetrated the exile groups in Miami so thoroughly that they often know about CIA boat raids before the boats even leave the Florida Keys. The Americans thought they were fighting a shadow war against a chaotic banana republic dictatorship. The thrill and the horror comes from the realization that they were fighting a highly disciplined counterintelligence state backed by the KGB. The CIA was playing checkers with exploding cigars. The Cubans and Soviets were playing chess with human assets. As 1963 ends, the Operation Mongoose files are quietly shuffled into deep storage. The spectacular failed. The second coming never happened. The seashell never exploded. But the silence that follows is deceptive. The wildest, most shocking revelation is not about a specific gadget. It is about the crown jewel. For years, the world believed these stories were rumors, communist propaganda designed to make the US look bad. The Americans tried to make Castro's beard fall out? Impossible. It sounded too stupid to be true, but deep in the archives, a document is waiting to be found. A document that compiles all the family jewels, all the sins. And when the public finally sees it, the shock will not be that the CIA tried to kill Castro. The shock will be that they enlisted the sworn enemy of the state to do it. The CIA didn't just build robot mollusks. They shook hands with the devil. And we are going to open the file on the Mafia Pact and the final undeniable proof of how the world's most powerful intelligence agency became the victim of its own imagination. The most terrifying realization of the Cold War is not that the enemy was a monster, but that the good guys had become unrecognizable. By 1975, the hysteria of the early 60s had faded, but the secrets remained buried in the vaults of Langley, Virginia. The world had moved on. The Vietnam War was ending. The Watergate scandal had shattered American trust in the presidency. But the ghosts of Havana were about to rise from the grave. The shock of this story is not simply that the CIA tried to kill Fidel Castro, it is who they asked for help. In the early 1960s, while the CIA's technical wizards were designing exploding seashells and fungal wetsuits, the agency's leadership realized they had a problem. Gadgets were unreliable. They needed professionals. They needed men who understood the geography of Havana's underworld, men who had lost millions of dollars when Castro nationalized the casinos. They needed the mafia. This is the reveal that baffled the KGB more than any exploding cigar ever could. The intelligence agency of the United States government, sworn to uphold the law, entered into a secret covenant with the heads of organized crime. The intermediary was a man named Robert Maheu, a former FBI agent turned private investigator who moved in the shadowy circles between Hollywood and the underworld. The CIA tasked him with approaching Johnny Roselli, the mob's fixer in Las Vegas. The pitch was surreal. The United States government wanted to put a hit on a head of state, and they were willing to pay $150,000 for the job. Roselli brought in the heavyweights: Sam Giancana, the boss of the Chicago outfit, and Santo Trafficante Jr., the head of the Tampa mob and the former ruler of Havana's gambling operations. Imagine the scene: CIA officers, representing the pinnacle of American patriotism, sitting in Miami hotel rooms with men who were actively being investigated by the FBI for murder, racketeering, and extortion. They were sharing drinks and plotting a murder. The CIA gave the mobsters the poison pills, the botulinum toxin capsules developed by the Technical Services Division. These were the very same pills referenced in the frantic KGB intercepts in Part 1. The plan was for the mob to use their lingering contacts inside the Hotel Havana Libre to slip the pills into Castro's food. The mystery of the frozen pills shattering in the kitchen was not just a clumsy accident, it was the failure of a joint CIA-Mafia operation. The irony is suffocating. The Attorney General, Robert Kennedy, was waging a crusade to destroy the Mafia at home, while the CIA was hiring the Mafia to do its dirty work abroad. The right hand did not know the left hand was holding a poisoned dagger. But for over a decade, this remained a rumor, a whisper in the dark. The Soviets suspected it, but they couldn't prove it. The American public dismissed it as conspiracy theory. Then came 1975. The Watergate scandal had acted as a pressure release valve for American secrets. The investigative journalist Seymour Hersh published a bombshell report in the New York Times alleging massive domestic spying by the CIA. The dam broke. In a panic, CIA Director William Colby ordered a compilation of every illegal, embarrassing, or unauthorized activity the agency had undertaken in the last 25 years. The resulting document was known internally as the Family Jewels. It was 693 pages of confession. It detailed everything: the wiretaps, the opening of mail, the experiments on American citizens, and, buried in the center, the assassination plots against foreign leaders: Lumumba in the Congo, Trujillo in the Dominican Republic, and the obsessive, unending campaign against Fidel Castro. The United States Senate convened a select committee to investigate, led by Senator Frank Church. These hearings, known as the Church Committee, became the stage for the final, undeniable reveal of the absurdity we have been tracking. The defining image of this entire saga occurred in the Senate caucus room. Senator Frank Church, under the glare of television lights, held up a weapon that looked like something out of a science fiction movie. It was a modified Colt pistol, equipped with a large scope and a strange battery attachment. It was the non-discernible microbio inoculator. This was the culmination of the poison dart technology. The gun fired a dart the width of a human hair. It was silent. It produced no recoil. Upon impact, the dart would dissolve instantly inside the target's body, releasing a frozen toxin that would cause a heart attack. The victim would feel nothing more than a mosquito bite. The autopsy would show natural causes. The world gasped. This wasn't a rumor. It wasn't Soviet propaganda. It was real hardware, paid for by tax dollars, displayed on national television. The committee called the witnesses. The experts from the Technical Services Division testified about the cigars. They confirmed that yes, work had been done to impregnate cigars with botulinum toxin. They confirmed the plans for the depilatory salts to make the beard fall out. They confirmed the contaminated diving suit. The exploding cigar became the cultural shorthand for the era, a joke told on late-night talk shows. But the reality revealed by the Church Committee was not funny. It was a portrait of an agency that had become a rogue elephant, operating outside the control of the President and the Congress. The KGB's confusion in 1961 was finally vindicated. They hadn't been fighting a rational enemy. They had been fighting an agency gripped by a pathological obsession. The sheer volume of plots estimates range from 8 verifiable attempts to over 600 alleged plots, suggests that killing Castro became a bureaucratic imperative, a box that needed to be checked, regardless of how insane the method was. And what was the result of all this madness? Fidel Castro survived. That is the ultimate twist of the knife. The most powerful nation on Earth, armed with nuclear weapons, limitless budgets, mafia hitmen, and poisoned dart guns, could not kill one man on an island 90 miles away. Castro outlasted John F. Kennedy. He outlasted Lyndon Johnson, Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford, Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, and George W. Bush. He died of old age in 2016. The CIA's plots achieved the exact opposite of their intended effect. They didn't kill Castro, they immortalized him. Every failed attempt fed his legend. He became the man who could not be killed, the David who dodged Goliath's stones time and time again. The exploding cigars and poison pills became part of his armor, proof that the Yankee imperialists were not only evil but incompetent. The Soviet Union, for its part, learned a valuable lesson. They learned that the Americans were capable of immense technological sophistication, but were prone to profound strategic blindness. The KGB stopped being baffled and started being cautious. They realized that an enemy willing to weaponize seashells is an enemy that has lost its grip on the line between reality and fantasy. Operation Mongoose stands today as a monument to the dangers of unchecked power and the absurdity of the Cold War. It was a time when men in suits sat in air-conditioned rooms and seriously debated the tactical advantages of the second coming of Christ and the aerodynamics of exploding mollusks. It is a story that reminds us that history is not always written by the victors. Sometimes it is written by the survivors. And in the game of exploding cigars, Fidel Castro was the only one left smoking. This has been the story of how the CIA tried to kill a dictator with a circus of death, and how the world found out the truth.